Hello, my little Liebfrau Milches, and welcome to the Friday edition of Moohead Radio. Sorry I'm a little bit late, but we had a power outage here in Florida, and you never know what's going to happen right around showtime. So I wanted to make sure that everything was up and running, and I got everything together. 7 minutes late, but hey, better Nate than Lever. Well, if you're dyslexic, you'll get it. So how is everybody doing? As we get closer and closer to draft time, and it's not that we're particularly close, I just kind of want to get rid of a few variables that are kind of going through the air, because a lot of people are getting upset with me because the more they pound me about my opinions on what the Browns should do, the more specific I get. And the more specific I get, they shut the fuck up, because I consider what I say before I say it, and this is not a time for pimpage of college quarterbacks, but this is the singular most important thing for an organization to try to turn itself around, which in the Browns' case is a very unlikely thing as long as Hugh Jackson and Jimmy Haslam are in the picture. But it doesn't stop me from presenting opinions nonetheless. By the way, on Twitter, you'll find you can join us at mooheadradio.com, or their link is up for the YouTube site, and the chat room on YouTube is available as well. I've also put a show link in just in case anybody wants to jump in and confront me, because ambushes are all fair. You know, all the things that you always wanted to do with Skip Bayless but couldn't because there's no phone line into the studio. When you wanted to reach your hand out and strangle a little cocksucker when he's saying bad things about LeBron James, but you can't. And they know they're insulated. Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith, they're insulated. You'll never get to them. You know, they'll infuriate you with their tweets. They'll infuriate you on the air, and they're insulated. Nobody can have a constructive debate. I welcome it because I learn stuff as I go. And believe me, I'm not a draft expert. I wouldn't know who the best quarterback is. I'm going to be right up front with you. I would not know. However, there are some mistakes that I've seen made in the past that I don't want the organization to make again. And that's kind of what this is about, okay? That's how we'll start. The first thing I want to say is this. Baker Mayfield is too short, all right? I'm tired of the Harry High School college quarterback guy who we end up getting because he was a big man on campus. And look, maybe Baker Mayfield's going to be great. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to bring up Drew Brees because that's what they always do when they talk about short quarterbacks. When they stretch these quarterbacks' heights to 6'1" or 6'2", you know, it was like the Johnny Manziel thing. You know, well, Johnny's 6 foot, you know, and my dick is 13 inches long. I mean, you know something, if you're looking things through the prism of the agent and not through reality, this is how you get numbers like this. Baker Mayfield, no. He might be 6 foot if he's lucky, all right? And when you see him on the field with real NFL players, you'd know how small he is. Jimmy Johnson as much as said so on Fox. There's no surprise. These are factual matters, and I don't understand how we can actually have an argument about somebody's height. Their height is either what they say it is or it isn't. It's the Tristan Thompson argument. Tristan Thompson is not 6'10". He's 6'7 3/4" in his bare feet. Okay? That's a fact. And when you look at him on the floor and you look at him standing side by side with LeBron James, he's about the same size, slightly shorter. Height is not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact. All right? And I'm tired of us getting these undersized guys who had less trouble throwing in college because of the available passing lanes and watching our quarterbacks with regular frequency getting their passes batted down at the line of scrimmage. I'm just tired of it. Now, you're going to say, but Mr. Moohead, Deshaun Kaiser, ... Look, We can find a lot of tall guys, too, who can't play the position. I get that. But nobody thought that Deshaun Kaiser, after what he did at Notre Dame, was a legitimate NFL prospect, except for Hugh Jackson and the Cleveland Browns, which would make you worry right off the bat. So I'm not worried about Deshaun Kaiser because he's your backup quarterback next year because he's contractualized, he's young. You're going to see if he has any upside, if he has the ability to sit still and learn, or whether his attitude goes south because he's arrogant and thinks he knows everything, which I think is the case, by the way. It's very hard for guys who are big men on campus to sit on their ass, especially when they're ballyhooed and they go to ballyhooed programs. When a guy wins a Heisman Trophy, Johnny Manziel, it's very hard to tell that guy that they're not very good, Tim Tebow, and they're going to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, even though they're not good enough to play that position in the NFL. We've seen it over and over again. Just going with guys who win Heisman trophies, Archie Griffin, doesn't mean a goddamn thing. What matters is, do they have the one skill that is the hardest one to judge? Not heart, because that's what's being questioned about Josh Rosen. Not speed, because that's what's being pimped about Lamar Jackson. But their ability to process information at a speed of a game that is horrendously fast, where the opportunities are split second in nature. Baker Mayfield should be out of the conversation as far as I'm concerned. I respect the kid. Look, he took a program that does not produce NFL quarterbacks, and he led them to, well, the penultimate game. So he did fine. The coaching staff took the ball out of his hands when it counted. He did look to me as if he was forcing the ball in when he was earlier in the game when they really had a chance to win the game. In the overtime, they didn't give him a chance. And yes, he's excitable. So was Johnny Manziel. And I'm tired of the cult of personality too. I mean, I don't care if these people give you a chubby. I don't care about that. It's about winning football games. And it's about finding somebody with that unique skill. And that's why I'm going to drop this bomb on you today. The reason that I'm saying, quarterback. It's not that quarterback's overrated. Of course not. It's just that there aren't that many good ones. Not in the sense of guys who have 10, 12, 13-year careers. There aren't many of them. A lot of those guys are guys like Carson Palmer, who just retired, who didn't really win a whole hell of a lot during the course. Well, maybe he did. Kind of. But you know something? He had a long career. And if you believe that any of these guys, Rosen, Lamar Jackson, any of them, if you believe that any of these guys in this quarterback crop are Jim Kelly-esque, I'm going to make comparisons with other quarterbacks who had long tenures and played successful football in the NFL. I'm not going to talk about the elite, the Aaron Rodgers and the Tom Brady's. That's like LeBron James. You don't draft a LeBron James. You luck into that opportunity. It's a point in time where one guy is so magnificent that he's the franchise. And that's what LeBron is. He's a Tom Brady, right? He's a guy who goes wherever he goes, they end up winning. And Tom Brady, you can put different guys on the field with him and they keep winning. Do you believe any of these guys? Do you believe Darnold or Rosen or one of those guys? I don't. And even if they were, they wouldn't be with the Cleveland Browns. I'll tell you something about Darnold right off the bat, because we were hearing about this right after the game. They're talking about, well, let us remind you that USC's offensive line was horrific, that 3 people on their offensive line in the interior of their offensive line just weren't up to snuff, and that Darnold was being pressured all season long. Well, what the fuck do you think's going to happen in Cleveland? Duh. What do you think has happened to every quarterback since they came to Cleveland? Duh. My point is, when the speed of the game, the size of the guys, the pressure around them, it defeats people. And people who are not long-term guys in the league, you know, and we're talking about guys like Troy Aikman, okay? If you're not a Troy Aikman or a Terry Bradshaw, if you're not a guy who's built for the long haul, one bad season will fucking wipe you out. Hey, General Dog, how you doing, Chief?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
You following me here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I'm going to want your input on this. Do you believe that Rosen, Darnold, Lamar Jackson, that any one of these guys who are being mentioned most frequently in this quarterback crop are Jim Kelly-esque, are guys who are going to have long, not necessarily elite, but long, successful NFL careers?
It's hard to say because there's no set formula for who's going to be good and who's not going to be good. There have been so many quarterbacks that have had 4 or 5, you know, 3 or 4 years in college that were, you know, outstanding statistically, and you know they won a lot of games. Colt McCoy, and in the NFL, they are just not NFL caliber quarterbacks.
Right.
Colt McCoy's major problem is he's small and his arm is not good enough.
Right.
In college, that works okay in college, but in the NFL, you got to be able to make those throws between the hashes and split the seams, and he couldn't do that.
You know what's amazing? It's you watch college games every weekend, and compared to what's surrounding them, their arms look absolutely fine. And then guys like Barkley come into Cody Kessler come into the league, and you look at them and it's like, oh my God, what the hell? There's balls fluttering. And then you realize, well, obviously this is a completely different game than what he's been playing at USC. I mean, and USC quarterbacks, we've had a bunch of them right in a row. Their receivers are fast as hell. The secondary guys are not particularly good. The window is way wide open to hit these receivers. And you can throw a little behind them and they can stop and catch the ball and they can still score touchdowns. It's not like that in the NFL.
Well, okay, like last year, you know who I wanted the Browns to draft in the last draft for quarterback? Deshaun Watson. And okay. I'll tell you why. First of all, he had more than 3 years in a college career playing 12 plus games per year as a starter. Okay, and then in his bowl games, when he played Alabama, he destroyed them. Now, if you're a college quarterback and you can go up against the best defenses that the NCAA can throw at you, I think that's a pretty good barometer for success in the NFL. It's not fail-proof, but of course, I think that's a pretty good barometer for it. Not to mention, the point I made earlier in Sunday's show about experience. Sam Darnold only has 2 years of starting experience and has played exactly 27 college games.
That's a great point. It's a great point.
He doesn't have enough experience running a college system. I think the NFL has become so quarterback needy because it is a passing game today. The NFL is so quarterback needy. They got kids pushing themselves out the door before they're ready, way before they're ready.
Well, let me ask you a question, knowing that. I mean, we can compare it to like, sellers markets in the real estate game. Now, the famous old saying is, everything has a price. And if you want something bad enough, you'll pay for it. But the Cleveland Browns are 1-31 in their last 2 years, and they're teetering on the brink of just complete irrelevance and really on the brink of completely losing their fan base. And you look at the quarterback situation. Every year we hear the same thing. The quarterback crop's not all that great. But And I think maybe these quarterbacks are somehow going to, fall, but they never do. At the end, the need and the desperation for a quarterback ends up taking over, so that you have to overpay through your draft position for who you got. You got to trade up for the guy, or if you got the one pick, you got to control that one pick and get the quarterback. But for the Cleveland Browns, now I want you to process all of this. These guys that we're looking at today will not play next year. They will not play because the team can't put guy with 27 games college experience or even 40 games of college experience behind a group of people that aren't a gelled offensive line and a gelled unit. They're going to have to be there's going to have to be a veteran quarterback anyway to bring in to tutor whoever it is that we draft. Do you think it's wise to overpay for somebody who may not play for a year or two when you have an entire roster that you need to fill?
No. If you have an entire roster with a lot of holes to fill, no, absolutely not. In the case of, let's say, and on the flip side of that coin, in the case of Aaron Rodgers was highly touted coming out of Cal, and he sat behind Brett Favre for 4 years. And today, the Packers would not tell you that was not an investment worth making. But that's not our situation here in Cleveland.
That's right. I mean, the same thing was true of Steve Young behind Joe Montana. I mean, if you're in a position where you're winning football games, it's a luxury to carry a guy like that. But we have such a shortage of talent on the team and depth on the team that it just strikes me as this frantic overreaction on the part of fandom, like having a goofy parade in sub-zero degree temperatures. It's this panic-stricken nature of fans to say, well, we've got to fall in line, and if we have to overpay for one of these guys, hell, we should even get both of them. You know, all this foolishness that I'm hearing. I mean, realistically, there are always going to be quarterbacks floating around in the draft, and you're not going to win more than 3 games next year, and you're still going to have a lovely draft position. I mean, and based upon what I've seen of the picks that go high on quarterbacks in previous drafts, a lot of them go bust anyway. And not just Cleveland's, all over the league. They go bust. And there is nobody.
There's no set formula. Really is no set formula. It's a crapshoot. I mean, a quarterback either has it or he doesn't.
The experts don't agree.
Well,
I mean, so we're going to rely on a bunch of war room guys to get us through this and pick the right guy. But my feeling is if you're overpaying in draft position for the guy, knowing damn well that you don't have a running back next year, knowing that you don't have a wide receiver next year, knowing damn well you don't have a left tackle because your guy who is your number one guy ended up hurting himself real bad and may not play next year. You definitely don't have a right tackle, so you don't have half of an offensive line. You don't have any defensive backs who can cover wide receivers. I'm like, man, you've got a lot of ground to make up. And you know something? No quarterback's going to win in that situation.
30 years ago, Sam Darnold would have been laughed at and drafted maybe in the 3rd round if coming out with only 2 years of college experience. 30 years ago, he would have been laughed at, and people might have drafted him in the 3rd round, maybe the 5th round, more likely. 30 years ago. But different game today. And if I'm John Dorsey, the bottom line is, if I'm John Dorsey, then what I do is I go out and get the best veteran quarterback I can get. If that's Alex Smith, so be it. Alex Smith is not spectacular, but he's solid. Like Josh McCown, solid. And Josh McCown, unfortunately, he never had a chance here. And what did Cody Kessler do to Hugh Jackson anyway? Cody Kessler, last year, he came in against the Titans. He started against the Titans, and he threw for 336 yards and 2 touchdown passes and almost did enough to win the game. And unfortunately, we weren't good enough to win the game. But what did Cody Kessler do to Hugh Jackson is what I want to know. I mean, he was never given a shake. Never.
No, he was not given a fair shake. But I think when he did come in, of course, a lot of it was because he hadn't had reps. He holds onto the ball too long, which in the case of the Browns' offensive line isn't very long.
Yeah.
And and the thing is he's slow-footed and he can't escape. And look, you don't have a quarterback on this roster who's capable of leading an NFL franchise even to a 500 record. Let's be honest about it. As far as McCown is concerned, we know that he was injury prone. He ended up breaking his hand with the Jets, but he lasted longer there. But no quarterback who's going to be running for their lives is going to last long in the NFL. And you don't want to put a young quarterback who you've overpaid for in that position. So they have to sit. I would rather eliminate the quarterback from discussion and say, you know something, screw quarterback. I'm not even interested right now. I'll put a veteran in. I want to win a few games. I want to be able to build my wide receiving core. I want to rebuild my offensive line around the loss of a Joe Thomas and to replace Sean Coleman. I want to make sure that I have a running back who is a pedigree running back, not Trent Richardson, for Christ's sake. I want a guy who's got speed and who's got size, who can move the pile, who can play in frozen, cold temperatures in the AFC North, who can help us control the line of scrimmage and time of possession. I want to have defensive backs and safeties who can cover wide receivers who have speed. Speed would be the single greatest consideration that I would be worried about, to make sure that they can at least play the pace of the game, to get my special teams to the point where everybody doesn't outrun them. I would be looking for fast guys who are willing to throw their bodies around and defensive backs who show me on film that they have some semblance of technique. These are the things that I would be looking for. Quarterback, I'm not even worried about because it's putting the cart before the horse. There's no reason for us to be thinking this way right now. We need to have a team. And if we have a roster that's young but talented, then we're a year away and we can get ourselves, we only win 3 games next year. You still get yourself a nice quarterback and you can always groom that individual. But the fact is, you're not going to go from 0 wins to 7 wins or what. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in the NFL. So that's what I do. I want to pick guys based upon the need, and believe me, the need is huge.
Yeah, I said that if I were John Dorsey, I would get a veteran quarterback, whatever best veteran quarterback I could get, whether that's Alex Smith or whoever. Put Kaiser behind him, get a developmental prospect in the third, in the third, fourth round, wherever. If not, put Cody Kessler behind Kaiser, and then roll with that as far as quarterback, and then make Saquon Barkley and Minka Fitzpatrick our 2 first round picks. I probably would trade down at this point from number 1.
Here's the thing that I find most interesting of all this. A lot of the fans are younger fans, and they look at me and they go, "Hey, look, Pops, what do you know about the game?" And I'll make it understandable for younger people.
That's me on Reddit.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. I mean, the world belongs to the young, and I'm a dinosaur. Fine, that's great. But I'll try to talk language that a younger person would understand. You want to get into gaming, okay? Because this is important to you. More important than the political landscape. You like to game. But you know what the first thing you do is? You start looking at what system you want. You don't start looking at what individual game. You want to look at a platform first. So you got to be looking at your PlayStation 4s. You got to be looking at your Xbox Ones. You got to be looking at different, depends what you want. Do you want a portable gaming system? Do you want something that's a console? But you find the backbone first. And then you say, okay, how am I going to select that system? Well, some of it's going to be on computing power and graphics. Some of it's going to be on the size of the unit and how much energy and how much heat it radiates. Another is, Are you concerned about using it as a whole home kind of theater kind of application so that you have the ability to control the guides on your television with it, so that you're going to lean toward Microsoft? Or are you looking for really just a badass gaming system with a Blu-ray in it, and then you're going to go PlayStation 4 with it? Which games are available on the platform? What exclusives do the different consoles have? You've been down this road, kiddies. You understand how to play that game. Why can't you build your football team the same way? You start looking at those things first, the backbone of the system, and then you worry about what games you're going to play. So you worry about what quarterback you're going to pick, but you got to have the system first.
Are you going to give a guy? Are you going to give a guy a whole store to run and not give him any staff? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, you know. And then going back to what I said about quarterback experience, how experience in college is important. You don't promote a store associate to manager unless that associate knows what he is doing in his current job.
Yeah, we're off to a bad start because of this whole Dorsey Hugh Jackson thing. It's a bad start to begin with. But honestly, you've got to have a system, offensive system brought in, a quarterback who's capable of running that system, somebody who knows it inside and out. We have Mark joining us. Who is Mark? No, Mark is not able to speak. Mark is a deaf mute, but he's hanging out in the studio. So we have a lurker. Oh, there he is.
Oh, yeah, that's the Buffalo fan.
Oh, Mr. Buffalo fan, come back.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Come back, little Sheba.
They're going to the playoffs for the first time since '99.
I know. I wanted to really shake his hoof. Hey, I'm a cow. He's a bison. This is good. Well, he'll jump back on. Jump back in there. All right, we got to get Mark back because he'll have something good to say. But the whole bottom line of this, and it isn't really hard, is that if you have a good offensive line that gels, if you have a system that the quarterback understands, the OC understands, and that the veteran quarterback can sit down and tutor the young quarterbacks on your roster, the Kaisers, the Kesslers, or whoever you have, the Hogans, whatever you have, and explain the system to them and really be able to work patiently with them as they're doing their number one reps. The backup quarterback is learning. He's got, the two guys got the clipboard and they are learning the plays inside out. No pressure at a 21-year-old kid to be running for his life. And
Sam Darnold, did you watch him against Ohio State? He was forcing passes, wasn't going through reads, and then he didn't have a whole lot of time to throw. But good quarterbacks find a way to stand out, and he doesn't stand out. He looks average. And you look at the stats; he's not even better than Cody Kessler's.
And there's Mark. He's come back. Do we have you now?
Yes, you do.
Oh, there he is! Congratulations, Mr. Bisonhead.
Right on.
It's Vicious Sid, actually.
Vicious Sid. But I go by what my computer screen says too. And don't worry, I'm a Mark too. But I'm a Mark with a C. So yeah, exciting times for Buffalo fans, and I'm seeing bumper stickers saying it starts with 1, and it's like, you got to get that first one. And all the past doesn't matter. When you're in the playoffs, the second season begins and anything's possible. So I'm happy for you.
Thank you. I'm happy for me too.
Well, you get to watch a little more football and be interested in it.
Yeah, that's very true. I was listening to your conversation while I was working out, so I wanted to jump in when I finished up. Sure.
Give us your take on this. That's what you're here for.
Oh, they're in such a conundrum right now. If you do draft a quarterback, you're putting him in the hands of Hugh Jackson. these owners tend to get antsy in the draft room when the lights are on, the ESPN's on, they see their face on the screen in the war room, and it's like, oh boy, here we go. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Manziel. He went up there and forced the issue with that. The quarterbacks I like aren't even the top quarterbacks. They're guys nobody's really talking about. Rudolph and a guy from a very small school named Kyle Laletta, actually. He went to Richmond. He'll probably be a second-round pick at this point, but they did invite him to the Super Bowl.
I'm open to it. I'm open to any prospect that's
a
not
Richmond Spider.
Frozen.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Carson Wentz kind of blew the whole, unknown school kind of thing out of the water. I mean, you either have the ability to process the speed of the game or you don't, and you could be anywhere. I mean, look.
Absolutely.
Saw Jim Zorn. Jim Zorn came out of Milton College. It doesn't exist anymore. Milton fucking College. And he became the starting quarterback for the Seahawks back when. I mean, and Brady was a 7th-round pick out of Michigan, and he wasn't even a good Michigan quarterback. These guys come out of the woodwork. And it's a lot like basketball players who in a lot of cases will be good college players, but they become great NBA players and great college players who don't make it, who Anthony Bennett when they're in the NBA. These guys can come from anywhere. Hey, Bronk, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I'm just mainly logging in to make sure I don't have a problem with my computer because an external hard drive I had burning smells coming from it.
Oh, that's usually a bad sign.
I think it's fried, but I've rearranged everything, taken that apart, and it smelled. And but I'm up here working now.
If your hard drive smells like a toaster, you know you have a problem.
Yeah, it's my previous PCs.
Fried circuits.
Yeah, I think it's the connectors.
So, so what do you do, Vicious Sid? What do you do? I mean, I'm laying my cards on the table and saying I pass on quarterback.
Oh, God,
I want to build a goddamn franchise, and I'm going to start it the right way. We were told we were ground zero last year. We're ground zero right now. 0-16 is ground zero. And we didn't start building a good roster this year. We got to start. And the only way you're going to do it is you got a qualified GM who's a good talent assessment guy. The only way I draft a quarterback is if I am so damn sure that he is going to have a long and prosperous NFL career. And you can't be sure of something like that.
Yeah, Moo, who's going to make that talent evaluation? Is it going to be
Dorsey?
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, I have much more faith in him.
But that will be the excuse for you. You see, what's happening is when you don't have communication from the top, or as Sam Bertigliano would point out, the pyramid, if you have, Jimmy Haslam at the top of the pyramid, even though he really belongs at the bottom of he belongs at the bottom of a pile of homosexual men, but we won't go there right now.
Yeah, don't go there.
There's an image you don't want to place in your mind and keep with you overnight. Jimmy Haslam on the bottom of the human pyramid. But then you have the two guys underneath. If these two guys here are not communicating, one guy's going to point the finger and say, I didn't want that player, and the other guy's going to say, well, I got the right players, but you're not coaching them up and your system sucks. And right off the bat, we're at loggerheads.
Yeah, we had this discussion like the other week. They can't be both on the same level. They can't be on the same level, the bureaucracy. It won't work. One of them has to be higher than the other one.
Well, and unfortunately for the Cleveland Browns, they've gotten off to a bad start that way. But, everybody wants to say to me, what quarterback? And I'm telling you today, I don't want a quarterback.
You know who Darnold looked like in that bowl game? He looked like Brady fucking Quinn.
He looked like that.
Yeah. I mean, Brady Quinn without the pretty eyes. That's what he looked like.
I can't see anybody down the field. I don't know what the problem is. Yeah.
He looked terrible.
Yeah. If he's a face of a franchise, it has to be an ugly franchise like the Browns. But I don't know. I mean, I can't stand up and say this is the one guy who, the only times I've really felt strongly about drafts in general and quarterbacks, crapshoot. I'm not even good at this. So I'm avoiding the issue completely because I don't have confidence that any of these guys can contribute more than the positions of need in the Browns, like a really good running back, a really top-end receiver with speed and size. These are things that will last for you, assuming they stay healthy. And, of course, anything is possible.
Well, I got another question for you, man.
Mm-hmm.
Kosar, how long did he sit before he started? I know in '84, when we went 8-8 and made the playoffs, he was playing, but
Kosar sat for 8 games.
Yep, I was just talking about half a season. That was because I remember when he came in and the whole place stood up.
Patriots.
Yeah.
It was the New England Patriots, and he fumbled his first snap.
Yeah, I mean, how many people
And I remember my dad, he fumbled his first step, and I always remember my dad, God bless the rest of his soul, but I always remember that. Bernie Kosar fumbled his first snap, and the first thing my dad yelled was, "Go back to Miami."
Wow.
Well, I remember the first pass he completed was an out pattern on the sideline. And, but the thing about Kosar is that Kosar understood the game, and I'm not suggesting that the speed of the game was the same in 1985 as it is today. But at the same time, his mind processed the speed of the game, and he understood where his guys were on the field right from the very beginning. The thing that was unique about Bernie Kosar compared to other quarterbacks that we've had is that he was coming in to a system. I mean, what system is Marty Schottenheimer's system? It was run the football and not throw the ball very much. But damn, Bernie Kosar understood where his receivers were on the field. And Bernie Kosar made those guys like Webster Slaughter and Reggie Langhorne and Brian Brennan, look better than they were because these guys were not speed merchants.
That's right.
The concept, he knew where they were in the field at all times. He kept his head on a swivel, and he knew who to go to because he conceptualized the field. Hard to figure out which, you don't really see that in college footage because it's easy to go when you have a guy who's so much faster than the other team, so much bigger, and he's your primary read. You can go to that primary read. Quarterbacks are completing 65 to 70% of their college passes because they have these go-to guys who are just vastly superior to the people they're up against. You can't get that read on watching the college level. And then when they come to you and the pros, it's overwhelming. I mean, playing Kaiser at 21 years of age with limited experience was such a huge mistake to begin with. But I just don't want to see, I want to see a veteran who understands that he's probably going to get his clock cleaned out there, but at least surround him when he has an idea of the offensive scheme that he's running, at least give him the opportunity to be surrounded with decent players so that he can get them the ball. I mean,
hence my problem with drafting a quarterback so high is, you remember Tim Couch, and Tim Couch's first 2 years in the league, he was sacked over 100 times.
Yep.
And that's just the sacks. That's not counting all the hits he took that are not official.
Yeah, poor guy's like got brain damage now, man. He took so much punishment.
Well, what happens is once it happens to these guys, you don't see them ever really coming back from the emotional beating and the fact that, and they talked about Couch crying, and then they said, well, he had a concussion and this and that. The beating that he took, he couldn't come back from. And Derek Carr's brother was the same way. I mean, he took I think in his rookie year, it was something horrible, like 72 sacks. And when that happens,
that's 5 a game. That's 5 sacks a game.
You don't recover from that.
Sick, man.
You don't recover from that.
So that's 1 every quarter and more.
History in the NFL seems to repeat itself with alarming regularity. What happened to Tim Couch in Cleveland? A few years later, the Texans come into the league, and their number 1 pick is David Carr. And what do? They throw him in just like they did with Tim Couch, and he got smashed behind the piss-poor offensive line. History keeps on repeating itself. And we're repeating the same mistakes we've been repeating since 1999, for crying out loud.
Hey, you guys, keep the conversation going. I got to step away just for a second and keep talking, guys. All right.
There's no way I want to draft a quarterback. I can't see anybody in there being able to step in unless he sits for at least a year. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't. And Joe Thomas may or may not even return. So
I don't think he will. I don't think Thomas.
He will. And we're going to be looking for another left tackle on top of the holes we got on the offensive line. Bitonio and Treader have been doing a good job, but the right side of the line is a freaking turnstile. And now you got Spencer Drango at left tackle, and he's a turnstile himself.
Drango's awful, man. I was at the game at Wembley, and that was like his first game or second game, and he just like couldn't block anybody to save his life. I mean, the Vikings were in our backfield the whole game. It was just amazing.
Spencer Drango is so bad that defensive ends might as well start saying "excuse me" before they run around him.
Yeah.
The thing I've noticed about Spencer Drango is that, from a technique perspective, he's backing up, but when he's backing up, his balance is so bad
he falls over.
Yeah, he tips over, and what happens is it's a weight distribution issue. I mean,
he's not playing he's not playing his natural position. I think it's important to state that as well. His natural position is guard.
Yeah, it's to me. I remember when Bob Golick played, for the Browns, and his background always interested me because a lot of guys. The offensive line isn't just about mass and size. It's about balance and leverage. And Golick was a prolific wrestler. And I always wondered if a guy who had really good wrestling skills would make a good offensive lineman, because it's so hard, because they train to stay on their feet and not, even if they get knocked down, they regain balance, and that they use leverage in order to control where their opponent goes. That's so much,
I would venture, I agree. And I would even venture to say that in today's passing league, I think it's actually more important to have technique and balance than it is to have power and size for offensive linemen today. Absolutely.
You remember those Broncos offensive lines in the mid to late 90s, they were all of a sudden notoriously known for being undersized, especially coming off those Dallas, because they had to pull and so much and do so much trapping that their scheme, they had to be smaller.
And again, it depends what kind of an offensive scheme. The pulling guards. I mean, it's really funny when they talk about Jim Brown's offensive line. You looked at Wooten and Gene Hickerson. Those guys were 260 pounds at the time. Today, the guys are 300 plus pounds. Yeah, I mean Dick Shafrath. I mean, those guys were like 250 pounds. Now they're these behemoths. That's just the way the game's played. But it's balance. And it's leverage. And what I see in Drango is that he has neither. And so he loses balance. And once you've danced him one way, you can just throw him to the ground and take a straight line to the quarterback. I mean, he offers no real resistance. This is a guy who, from a technique perspective, can't play at this level, at least that position. And Cam Irving was the same exact way.
What a pick he was. Jeez.
And, there's a guy who, when we tried to play him in his regular position, he would snap the ball over the quarterback's head. So, I mean, we end up with problems. You've got, and you can't use a 1 or a 4 pick, obviously, an offensive lineman. But, I remember when Anthony Munoz was at USC and Cincinnati picked him, and they picked him first round. And Joe Thomas is another great example of this, of somebody who was identified by all consensus people as being great, and that they were going to be a great offensive lineman for years to come. If I knew, correct, the Ravens. I mean,
Cam Irving, by the way, is now backing up Mitchell Schwartz in Kansas City.
Whoa, he's going to Kansas City. Kansas. Yeah, that's the people. But the people really need to see over there. John Dorsey's like, I'm glad I got out of there.
Mitchell Schwartz.
Mitchell Schwartz. Yeah, I mean,
Sounds like a lawyer, not an offensive lineman.
It seems like a dream ago that we had actual players on our offensive line. But again, my feeling is if I knew that there was a Joe Thomas available in the first round, I'd take him.
Oh yeah, you pick him with like the fourth pick or even the first pick if he's going to be that good. And Thomas, he was that good.
He was that good, and so was Ogden, and so was Munoz. I mean, they do come along. Yeah, what's up?
Oh, this draft is tackle rich. I don't think you have to go reaching for tackles in this draft. It's pretty deep.
Yeah,
Former Brown Orlando Brown's son is in the draft. Actually, Connor Williams from Texas. It's
we got
ridiculous.
5 picks in the first 2 rounds, so maybe on the third of those picks we can get a decent tackle then.
You know, my belief is if Orlando Brown's son came to Cleveland to play, that he'd be blinded by a flag, just like his father.
He'd get staph infection or something.
My motherfucking eye, goddamn referee blinded me. Yeah, it's like
that's in the top 25 of all great Browns misfortunes, though, isn't it? That's got to be around the 20s. Yeah.
I made a lot of enemies when, back when Orlando Brown was injured that way, and I started playing She Blinded Me with Science by Thomas Dolby on the show. I think that really upset a lot of people. So I'll go.
Was that worse than when Gary Baxter blew out both of his legs at the same time?
Oh, God. Unbelievable.
That's the one that always sticks in my head.
Yeah.
I found out recently. I actually found out recently Orlando Brown had a son. And that Orlando Brown himself has passed away.
Oh no, really?
I actually didn't know that until recently that he had passed away.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Seriously. What did he die of?
Let me look it up real fast. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Something to do with his heart.
Wow, well, that somehow doesn't surprise me. This is a dangerous game, but it's too bad. Feel badly about that.
Well, the Browns should always draft people named Brown anyway. Why not? Let's get them in here.
Yeah. Well, again, I want to kind of switch the conversation away because we got to get to one other thing.
He was found dead, and the coroner ruled that he had died of diabetic ketoacidosis.
Oh.
Basically, he was diabetic, and he didn't get insulin, and he died. That's
wow. That's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see if Durango is a guard. That's correct. I'm just Sauce Montana says, didn't Wentz and Watson go high in the first round? Why keep passing on good quarterbacks when we tried we had an opportunity for those people. We didn't have the front office to pull it off. And again, if you're telling me now that you believe that Watson and Wentz were going to be quality quarterbacks for the duration of time of 12 years in the NFL, if you knew that, then you're absolutely right. But as we sit here today, Watson has a ripped out ACL. Yeah. We all believe that he's going to come back and be fine.
No.
But there is every possibility that he's not going to have a clean career because he will forever be saddled with knee problems. So again, when you have a quarterback who's trying to make a lowly franchise into something and he starts playing great football for you, but you can't protect him, just go back to what Mr. Moohead is saying today and say, here's a good opportunity to make sure you've built up a strong offensive line and that you can protect whoever it is you eventually draft. Tony's in the chat room. ESPN fires Donovan McNabb for asking female coworker if she was a squirter. Now, I don't know whether that's real or not.
Oh, my God.
Well, I mean, I don't know. ESPN doesn't need a lot of excuse to fire people, that's for sure. I mean,
it ain't like Howard Cosell shouting, "Run, monkey, run" on the air.
Wow, that's a little different though, because they actually proved that was not a racial epithet. And obviously Cosell was very pro Muhammad Ali. He was not a bigot. Donovan McNabb was a disappointment as a quarterback, perhaps, but again, it's all it takes, is one comment in today's environment, and that's going to cost you your job. But ESPN will fire anybody right now to save payroll so they can pay for these miserable games that we watch.
Why would they need to save payroll? They're losing John Gruden.
I cannot believe 10 years, $100 million for a guy who literally trashed the Buccaneers organization.
And you were there for it.
From top to bottom.
He acquired.
Rumor has it the Buccaneers even tried to get him back.
I mean, that's just, to me.
Can I ask a question about John Gruden? You guys?
Sure.
All of you. Name one young quarterback he developed. He was known for taking journeymen and, doing the best he could with them, cobbling what he could together. He did not develop one young quarterback in his time. He became brand association with Brett Favre, as did.
That's
Andy
right.
Reid did. Guys did. He did not develop one quarterback. He had two young quarterbacks in Tampa Bay. I believe it was Chris Sims and one other guy, and he benched them quicker than anything. The second they threw one too many picks in a game, went right back to Jeff Garcia every time.
Well, Chris Sims was living proof that once your spleen is destroyed, you're never the same again. I mean, but I will say this about John Gruden, that everything was in place. Dungy put everything into place, but he managed to emotionally build the team together to get them that Super Bowl. But after that, you look organizationally, and the talent this is what's left Tampa Bay in the state they've been in ever since. John Gruden was the guy who started the downward spiral. So, he's going back to Oakland, and Oakland is a franchise that's going nowhere. Let's be honest about it. I mean,
somewhere.
Yeah, they're going to Vegas.
yeah, you're right. You're right. The silver dollar pancake land. Yeah. But Derek Carr, I mean, we were all saying that this is the turnaround the Raiders are looking for, and it's like, it doesn't happen for that organization either. And hiring John Gruden for 10 years and $100 million, that is name brand association. And because it has nothing to do with there being any evidence that John Gruden knows anything more about the way the game's played today than he did 10 years ago.
And you know what's going to be John Gruden's biggest obstacle in Oakland is?
What?
The biggest obstacle in Oakland is going to be himself, or rather the romanticized version of his younger self. That's going to be his big, and I'm not going to take credit for this idea. I actually read this, and I agree with it 100%. John Gruden's biggest enemy in Oakland is going to be his own self.
He's Chucky, the persona.
Yeah.
Brand now.
Yeah, kick your microphone up a little, would you, Sid?
Okay.
Yeah, you need a little more volume from you because you're getting kind of stepped on. We want to hear your, I think Professor Kingsfield would say, Sid, fill the room with your intelligence. All right.
Oh, and I do want to say, Mark, I'll be rooting for the Buffaloes in the playoffs because, fuck the New England Patriots and fuck the Steelers.
Well, nothing would be better than for Tyrod Thomas to have like the game of a lifetime. I mean, and look, it can happen. I mean, I don't think the Buffalo Bills, if they won their first round game, are going to go any further than that. I don't believe that. But you never know when destiny takes you by the hand and you have that one game where everything goes right. It's a long shot, but you know something? It's like we've learned in the past. I'd so much rather be there than be on the sidelines or the outside looking in. I'd rather be able to convince myself that we might somehow get lucky and win a playoff game than never to be there. So you were lucky to get there. I mean, let's be honest. You got help to get there. The best kind of help, which is the Ravens losing, and I don't think the Ravens deserve to be there any more than the Bills deserve to be there, Sid. But the bottom line is is that Buffalo did what it needed to do to get in, and now that you're in, the second season begins, and you can throw caution to the wind. Nobody expects you to win.
Just go out there, have fun, play loose.
That's it. That's the game. You know, we got to pick the games before we get out of here. And I know that I'll go to my, because I fell so far behind in the league. Because I started the last picks the last week where I was picking my nose. Tennessee at Kansas City. What do we got?
Kansas City.
Yeah, without a doubt. In fact, I've picked Tennessee to score the fewest points this week.
Kansas City's defense was primarily responsible for them beating New England, and Tennessee does not have a very good offensive line. I'm going with Kansas City all the way.
Yep. All right. How about Atlanta and the Rams?
Rams are my Super Bowl pick.
And, you know, believe me, all I do is I look at Atlanta. When I pick them, they lose. When I don't pick them, they win. Fuck Atlanta. I'm going with the Rams. Right.
Atlanta's not the team they were last year.
Yeah. And Buffalo at Jacksonville. Boy, you know, here we go, Sid. We'll let you pick it first.
I think it's going to come down to which quarterback makes the least mistakes, and we know which one does and which one doesn't. I see Bortles giving the Bills a couple of gifts, and the Bills have 2 safeties that have 5 INTs, and no other team has that. He's going to give them a present. He's also loose with the football. He has 9 fumbles. The Bills, 20-17.
Interesting. How about General Dog? What do you think? Buffalo or Jacksonville?
Well, I feel Jacksonville has a very good defense, particularly in their defensive line. So they're very good in the trenches, pushing people around. You know, Buffalo's offensive line is not a bunch of pushovers or what I call the Browns' offensive line, 5 fat fucks who backpedal. But you know, Tyrod Taylor is mobile, so he can extend plays, and it's a tough call. I'm gonna be rooting for Buffalo, but I'm gonna have to go with Jacksonville.
All right, Bronk.
Yeah, I think I'm picking Jacksonville in a very low-scoring game, like 12-6, 12-9. I can't see there being any excitement in this game at all, unless you're a fan of one of these teams. Low scoring.
The one thing I can say for Sid's advantage in this, if there's one franchise in these playoffs that is the most dubious of them, it would be Jacksonville, just because they've been so bad in recent history, and that their quarterback has been so bad in recent history. You know, it's a lot like the Bengals giving Marvin Lewis a 2-year extension when he hasn't won a playoff game in his life. It starts out a certain way, but then when you start getting to the 6th, 7th game and you still haven't won a playoff game, you start saying, damn, I can't take Cincinnati seriously if they make the playoffs. This is Jacksonville's first trip to this dance. And will it weigh heavily on them in their home stadium? Will they choke? Will they underperform? That's Buffalo's hope in this. You know, the fact is that during the regular season, Jacksonville was a great defense and a better team overall than Buffalo. But I'm picking Jacksonville to win. But you know something? This is one of those things when the game starts, you're going to feel it real quick. Because if Bortles does what Sid just said, it's going to be apparent if the moment is too large for him. And these are the kind of games that change the course of franchise histories. And the Bengals never recovered from their offer in the playoffs, and they've accepted their defeat. It was either Hugh Jackson or Marvin Lewis. And honestly, you know, if you can, you know, one guy gets you to the playoffs and loses, the other just loses. The last game is Carolina at New Orleans.
Tough game. I think the Saints, yeah. It could go either way, though.
Does anybody believe Carolina is going to win?
They can. Definitely can.
Depends on which Cam Newton shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for that Drew Brees last hurrah.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's going to go out to a big lead, and the other team's going to come back and win it. Somebody will be leading by 17, and there'll be some fourth quarter comeback by somebody.
And I'm picking New Orleans to win the game. So, but what the hell do I know? We got to get out of here. It's after 7 o'clock, and I wanted to put in my full 60 minutes on the show today. Sid, I'll be watching your game because I'm not watching football outside of the Browns, but because of you, buddy, I'm going to be, and I'll be cheering for the Buffalo Bills. I promise you that, because if anybody understands what it is to be a denigrated franchise when they start running documentaries about how many Super Bowl games you've lost, and let's see if we can bring the players back together and talk about how they failed 4 times, yada yada yada. I want to end that conversation once and for all. We live it in Cleveland all the time. LeBron James killed the ghost for basketball, but the football ghost lives on. I'd like to see something new to talk about in Buffalo after all these years.
Yeah, just get the curse.
Absolutely. This Browns fan is going to be rooting for the Bills.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for jumping in. Sid, thank you. General Dog, thank you. Bronk, thank you. And we'll see what happens come the weekend. All right?
Go Bills.
All right. Take care, guys. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us on this edition of Moohead Radio. We'll talk more about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Of course, tomorrow is Isaiah Thomas starting. He's still going to be on that 20-minute minutes restriction, but that's okay. We'll get a view of what the Cavaliers offense to start games might look like, which hasn't been very good recently, and we'll see if that gives a little jolt of energy to the Cavaliers. We'll talk more about that come the beginning of the week. Of course, no halftime and post-game shows this weekend. The Brown season is over, but I will be back with you on Monday. This I promise. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you again on Monday. Until then, happy football watching, and hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.